If you abandon your parents at my doorstep, I will call Adult Protective Services. The words escaped my lips with a calm certainty I never knew I possessed. My hands gripped the doorframe for support, the weight of my body awkwardly balanced on my good leg. The cast on my right leg felt heavier now, a physical manifestation of the boundary I was finally setting after 55 years. My sister Carol's face transformed from calculated confidence to disbelief, then to raw fury. Beside her, Steve shifted uncomfortably, while our parents, Walter and Martha, now in their late 70s, stared at me with a mixture of shock and indignation. You wouldn't dare, Carol hissed, but I caught the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Try me, I replied, my voice steadier than my racing heart. I've told you repeatedly that I cannot care for them with my broken leg. If you leave them anyway, that's abandonment. I saw my father's face harden. No one needs you, Amy, he said coldly. You've always been selfish. The familiar sting of his words washed over me, but for once, they didn't penetrate. Something had broken inside me when I fell 3 weeks ago, and it wasn't just my tibia. 3 weeks earlier, I was having a particularly good day. The publishing house where I've worked as an editor for 25 years had hosted an awards ceremony for a novel I'd shepherded to publication. It had won the National Literary Merit Award, a significant achievement in our industry. Rain pattered against umbrellas as colleagues congratulated me outside the venue. I felt a warm glow of pride, despite knowing there was no one waiting at home to celebrate with me. My husband James had passed away a decade ago after a long illness, and we never had children. At 55, I'd grown accustomed to my solitude, though never entirely comfortable with it. Walking to my car, I mentally composed text messages to my sister and parents about the award, then deleted them in my mind. They wouldn't care. To them, my career had always been a curious hobby, something I did to fill my empty life, as my mother once put it. The parking garage floor was slick with rainwater. I wasn't paying attention, preoccupied with my thoughts and the lingering satisfaction of professional recognition. One moment I was walking, the next I was airborne. My feet slid out from under me, and I landed hard on my right side. The pain was immediate and intense. Oh my God, are you okay? A woman rushed over, concern etched on her face. I tried to stand, but when I put weight on my right leg, white hot pain shot through me. I think I hurt my leg, I gasped, fighting waves of nausea. Don't move, said a man who had also stopped to help. It might be broken. The couple, Lisa and Mark, insisted on driving me to the hospital. As Mark helped me into their car, I had a sudden memory of falling from a tree at 12 and my mother sighing heavily before saying, "Couldn't you have done this next week? Carol has her piano recital tonight." I'd sat in the school nurse's office until after dark, when a teacher finally drove me home. At the hospital, the emergency room was busy, but the triage nurse took one look at my leg and expedited my care. X-rays confirmed what I'd feared, a complex fracture of the tibia, complicated by decades-old knee issues. You're looking at 8 to 12 weeks of recovery time, the doctor explained, showing me the X-ray. At your age, bones don't heal as quickly as they once did. 12 weeks. I repeated, immediately thinking about work, my two-story house, how I'd manage everyday tasks. I'm also concerned about those arthritic changes in your knee, she continued. This injury may exacerbate them. You'll need physical therapy once the cast comes off. They gave me painkillers, put on a cast, and arranged for crutches. By the time I was discharged, it was past midnight. The hospital called a taxi to take me home. Getting up the walkway to my house with crutches in the rain was a nightmare, but I managed it eventually, soaked and exhausted. First night at home. My first night alone with a broken leg taught me how hostile my own home could be. Stairs became mountains. The bathroom seemed miles away. Making tea was an expedition requiring careful planning. I felt old and vulnerable in a way I never had before. Once settled on the couch with a blanket and that hard-won cup of tea, I texted my family about the accident. I didn't expect much response. They'd never been particularly nurturing, at least not with me, but I thought they should know. Just letting you know I slipped in the rain today and broke my leg. Complex fracture. Will be in a cast for 8 to 12 weeks. I added nothing about the award. It seemed irrelevant now. While waiting for a response, I called my boss, David. Despite the late hour, he answered immediately. Amy, what happened? Are you all right? His concern was so immediate, so genuine, that I felt tears threaten. I explained the situation, apologizing for the projects that would be delayed. The only thing you need to focus on is recovery, he insisted. We'll arrange for you to work from home as much as possible, but your health comes first. That was a relief. At least work wouldn't be a problem. David had always been supportive, unlike some other authority figures in my life. A lifetime of seeking approval had made me exceptionally good at my job, a truth I rarely acknowledged to myself. About 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a reply from my mother. Amy, at your age, you should know better than to walk carelessly in the rain. This is what happens when you don't pay attention. We can't visit right now because we're busy with the renovations at Carol's house. Be more careful next time. No, are you okay? No, do you need anything? Just blame and excuses. I set my phone aside, unsurprised but still hurt. Walter and Martha had never hidden their preference for my sister. Growing up, Carol got the bigger bedroom, the better Christmas presents, and all the attention. I'd found a family photo album once where I'd been cropped out of half the pictures. When I asked my father about it, he just shrugged and said, "You were blinking in most of them anyway." The next morning, I woke to my phone's insistent ringing. Pain throbbed through my leg despite the medication, and I fumbled for my phone. It was Carol. Amy, she began without preamble. Mom and Dad have their annual physicals next week. Since you're at home anyway, you'll need to drive them and help around their house afterward. I blinked, still groggy from pain medication. Carol, I broke my leg yesterday. I'm in a cast. I shifted painfully, trying to sit up. Yeah, Mom mentioned something about that, she dismissed. But it's not a big deal. You don't need two good legs to drive them to appointments. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you serious? I can barely move around my house. Don't be so dramatic. The doctor's office has wheelchairs. Mom says they might need help with shopping and meal prep after the appointments. Nothing you can't handle from a chair. Carol, I physically cannot drive with this cast. And I can barely stand long enough to make myself tea. God, you're such an egoist, she spat and hung up. I stared at the phone, stunned but not surprised. Carol had always been entitled and self-absorbed. As teenagers, she'd borrowed my college fund for a semester abroad in Paris. Amy doesn't really need college, our parents had reasoned. She's not academically gifted like Carol. I'd worked 2 jobs to put myself through state school while Carol attended an Ivy League university. 15 minutes later, my mother called. Amy, she began in her scolding voice, the one she'd used throughout my childhood. How could you refuse to help your sister? She's very busy with a charity gala she's chairing. I cut her off. Mom, I have a broken leg. I physically cannot drive or care for you and Dad right now. You're just making excuses. You're perfectly capable of helping family, broken leg or not. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Mom, do you remember when I was 12 and fell from the tree? You made me wait at school for hours because Carol had a piano recital. That was different, she snapped. That was just a sprain, and the recital was important for her future. This is a complex fracture, and my recovery is important for my future. Well, that's just selfish thinking, Amy. Family helps family. I was too tired and in too much pain for this circular conversation. Mom, I'm out of commission for at least 2 months. Please don't call me with these requests again. I hung up before she could respond. The friend's visit. That evening, my doorbell rang. Using my crutches, I made my way slowly to the door, half expecting to find Carol or my parents there. Instead, I saw my colleagues and friends, Patricia and Barbara, through the peephole. We heard from David what happened. Patricia exclaimed when I opened the door. Why didn't you call us? I felt suddenly embarrassed. I didn't want to bother you. Bother us? Barbara looked genuinely hurt. Amy, we're your friends. That's what we're here for. They bustled past me, arms laden with grocery bags. We've brought enough food to last you a week, Patricia announced, heading straight for my kitchen. all prepared meals that just need heating. I watched in amazement as they unloaded containers of soup casseroles and pre-made salads into my refrigerator. You didn't have to do this, I finally managed to say, my throat tight with emotion. Shut up and sit down, Barbara ordered, though her tone was gentle. We're also going to set up a proper recovery station for you. While I sat with my leg propped up, they rearranged my living room to make everything accessible, set up a laptop workstation, and organize my medications. Patricia, who had experienced a similar injury a few years back, showed me tricks for managing with crutches. Barbara, ever practical, set up a meal and medication schedule on my phone with reminders. Call us if you need anything, Patricia insisted before they left. We mean it, day or night. And don't try to be a hero, Barbara added. That's how secondary injuries happen. After they left, I sat in my reorganized living room, surrounded by their thoughtfulness, and realized something. My friends showed more genuine care for me than my family ever had. The second request, a week passed. My leg was healing, but recovery was slower than I'd hoped. David had arranged for me to work from home, and I was gradually adapting to my new limitations. My friends checked in regularly, sometimes bringing food or just stopping by to keep me company. Then, exactly 1 week after Carol's first call, my phone displayed her number again. Against my better judgment, I answered. Amy, she began, sounding cheerful, which immediately put me on guard. Steve and I are planning our 30th anniversary trip. 3 weeks in Europe. Isn't that fantastic? Congratulations, I replied cautiously. Thanks. Anyway, we're leaving next Sunday, and since you're at home anyway, you'll need to have mom and dad stay with you while we're gone. They really can't be alone that long at their age. I nearly dropped the phone. What? Carol, I still have a broken leg. I'm not at home anyway. I'm recovering from a serious injury. Oh, come on. It's been 2 weeks? You're fine. They don't need much care, just someone to cook meals and make sure they take their medications. No, I said firmly. I can't do it. I'm sorry, but I physically cannot care for our parents right now. She exploded. You selfish bitch. You're just lying around doing nothing while I need help. You've always been lazy, but this is a new low. I was stunned by her venom. Carol, I literally broke my leg. Why can't they stay at their own house with a home health aide? Do you have any idea how expensive that is? She snapped. Besides, they don't need a stranger. They need family. I almost pointed out that the cost of a home health aide was surely less than their 3-week European vacation, but I bit my tongue. I'm sorry, but I can't help. You'll need to find another solution. You're ruining everything. She shouted. We've already bought non-refundable tickets. That's not my problem, I replied, then hung up before she could say anything else. Steve had come from old money, but his parents had cut him off when he dropped out of law school. Though he eventually became a corporate lawyer and reconciled somewhat with his family, the financial damage was done. Carol had always resented that they weren't as wealthy as Steve's siblings and compensated by pressuring our parents to fund their lifestyle, convincing them it was investing in the family legacy. The final confrontation, 3 days of blessed silence followed. No calls from my family, no text messages. I started to think they'd finally gotten the message. I was wrong. Saturday morning, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and my friends always texted before coming over. Using my crutch, I made my way slowly to the door and looked through the peephole. My heart sank. There stood Carol, Steve, and my parents. I opened the door but blocked the entrance with my body and crutch. What are you doing here? Carol smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. We're dropping mom and dad off. Our flight leaves tomorrow morning, and we have some last-minute shopping to do. I stared at them in disbelief. I told you I can't care for them. Steve stepped forward. Look, Amy, it's just for 3 weeks. We really need this break. I noticed how tired Steve looked. Rumors suggested his law firm was downsizing, and Carol's expensive tastes had always strained their finances. But that wasn't my problem. And I really need to recover from my broken leg, I replied. I'm sorry, but no. My mother's face hardened. Amy, at your age, You should be more responsible. Family duty comes before personal comfort. I gestured at my cast. A broken leg isn't about comfort, Mom. I can barely take care of myself. My father adjusted his glasses, a nervous habit from his teaching days. Carol and Steve work hard. They deserve a vacation. And what about me? I asked, a lifetime of suppressed questions suddenly bubbling up. Don't I deserve basic consideration? Not one of you has asked how I'm doing or if I need help since this happened. Carol's face flushed. We don't have anyone else to care for them. You're just sitting at home anyway. That's not my problem, I repeated, and started to close the door. Steve stuck his foot in the way. A shockingly aggressive move from my usually passive brother-in-law. You can't just leave us stranded like this. I'm not stranding anyone, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. I'm saying no to an unreasonable request. Carol suddenly looked calculating. Fine, we'll just leave them here in the foyer. You won't be able to leave them outside. And that's when I said those words that changed everything. If you abandon your parents at my doorstep, I will call Adult Protective Services. They take elder abandonment very seriously. Her eyes widened. You wouldn't dare. Try me, I said, keeping my voice level. I've told you repeatedly that I cannot care for them. If you leave them anyway, that's abandonment. My mother gasped. My father's face darkened with anger. No one needs you, Amy, he said coldly. You've always been selfish. Carol seized on this. Exactly. You have no family of your own, no children to care for. The least you could do is help those who do have responsibilities. Something snapped inside me. No family? I spent 10 years caring for my dying husband while working full-time. Don't you dare talk to me about responsibilities when you've never once asked how I was coping with being a widow at 45. I turned to my parents. I've spent my entire life trying to earn your approval. Nothing was ever enough. You took my college fund for Carol's semester abroad. You missed my wedding because Carol's in-laws were hosting a garden party the same weekend. You never once visited James during his illness. My mother's lips thinned. You've always been so dramatic, Amy. Family means supporting each other. Family means reciprocity, I counted. It means giving and receiving. When have any of you ever supported me? There was a moment of stunned silence. Then my father spoke, his voice cold. We don't need this ingratitude. Let's go. Fine, Carol snapped. But don't ever ask us for anything again. I never have, I replied quietly and closed the door. Through the peephole, I watched them leave, Carol gesticulating wildly, my mother dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. When they were gone, I leaned against the door, my heart pounding. I'd never stood up to my family like that before. I made my way to the kitchen and prepared a cup of tea, my comfort drink since childhood. My hands trembled as I waited for the kettle to boil. The aftermath. An hour later, my phone started ringing. My mother. I ignored it. Then my father. I ignored that too. A string of text messages followed, which I didn't read. Finally, a lengthy message from my mother appeared. Amy, you are a terrible daughter. Carol is devastated by your selfishness. We will be staying with the Johnsons while they are away. This means we must postpone the renovations on Carol's house because we can't supervise the contractors. This is all because of your selfishness. From this day forward, we don't want any contact with you. You are no longer part of this family. I read the message twice, then felt a startling laugh escape me. They were cutting me off? That was supposed to be a punishment? I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. Without hesitation, I blocked all their numbers. My mother, my father, Carol, and Steve. It was surprisingly easy, like excising a tumor that had been growing for decades. New connections. 2 weeks later, I received a call from my Aunt Judith, my mother's sister. We'd always been close, though we didn't speak often since she lived across the country. Amy, darling, I just heard from Martha that you two aren't speaking anymore. She says you've been terribly selfish. I sighed. Let me guess, she didn't mention I broke my leg, and no one from the family even checked on me? There was a pause. You broke your leg? When I told her everything, the accident, my parents' dismissive responses, Carol's demands, and finally the confrontation at my door. There was a long silence. "Oh, Amy," Aunt Judith finally said. "I'm so sorry. Martha just told everyone you refused to help Carol for no reason." This puts things in quite a different light. "I figured as much," I said, unsurprised. "I'll make sure the rest of the family knows what really happened," she promised. "Not that you should worry about what they think, but I can't stand the thought of Martha spreading lies." Aunt Judith had always been different from my mother, warmer, more empathetic. As a child, I'd wondered how two sisters could be so different. Now I understood. My mother had chosen bitterness, while Aunt Judith had chosen kindness. Recovery and renewal. The weeks passed, and my recovery progressed steadily. Physical therapy became a highlight of my routine. By the end of the second month after the accident, I was walking with only a slight limp. My doctor was pleased with my progress, but reminded me to continue taking it easy on stairs. My first day back at the office was unexpectedly emotional. My colleagues had decorated my desk with welcome back signs, and David had organized a small celebration with my favorite pastries. "We miss you around here," Barbara said, giving me a gentle hug. Patricia handed me coffee in my favorite mug. "The office wasn't the same without you correcting everyone's grammar." I laughed. Well, someone has to maintain standards. Getting back into my work routine felt surprisingly good. Sitting at home for weeks had made me realize how much I genuinely enjoyed my career. The publishing world, with its challenges and creative energy, had been my sanctuary for 25 years. About 3 months after the accident, Patricia and Barbara were having dinner at my house when Patricia asked, "Have you heard anything from your family?" I shook my head. "Not since I blocked their numbers. Aunt Judith says they're still bad-mouthing me to anyone who'll listen." "Does that bother you?" Barbara asked gently. I considered the question carefully. Honestly, not as much as I expected. It's like once I accepted that they'll never change, it stopped hurting so much. Patricia raised her glass. "To toxic family members, may they stay blocked forever." We all laughed and clinked glasses. That night, after my friends left, I stood in my garden, admiring the early spring bulbs I'd planted last fall. My leg was healing well, only troubling me when I overdid it or when rain was coming. The physical pain was fading, and surprisingly, so was the emotional pain. For years, I'd tried to earn my family's love and approval. I'd been the reliable one, the one who never complained, the one who accepted that I would always be second best. The broken leg had forced me to say no for once, and that had changed everything. As spring progressed, I found myself embracing my newfound freedom. I joined a book club that met on Wednesday evenings, something I could never have committed to when I was at Carol's beck and call. I signed up for a weekend watercolor class, reconnected with old friends, and even planned a solo trip to the coast for summer. I thought about my parents occasionally. They were in their late 70s, not exactly young, but still independent. I hoped they were well. Despite everything, I didn't wish them ill. Maybe someday we could have a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation. But I wasn't holding my breath. One Saturday in May, almost 4 months after my accident, I was at the farmer's market when I thought I glimpsed Carol in the crowd. My heart jumped, but then the woman turned, and it wasn't her. I was surprised to realize I felt disappointed. Some small part of me had hoped it was her, that perhaps she'd changed, that she wanted to apologize. But that was unlikely. People like my sister and parents rarely admitted they were wrong. They'd probably go to their graves believing I was the selfish one who had wronged them. And that was okay. I couldn't control what they thought or said about me. I could only control my own actions and choices. That evening, I had dinner with friends at a new restaurant downtown. As I looked around the table at these people who genuinely cared for me, who had shown up when I needed them, who respected my boundaries, who valued me for who I was, I felt a profound gratitude. 2 weeks later, Aunt Judith called with news. "Your mother's been telling people you reached out begging for reconciliation, but she refused." I laughed. "That's creative. I haven't unblocked their numbers." "I figured as much," she said. "How are you doing, really?" "I'm good," I said, realizing I meant it. "Better than I've been in a long time." After we hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and settled in my favorite chair with a manuscript I was editing. My leg was almost completely healed now, with only occasional stiffness. Life wasn't perfect. Work was demanding, dating at 55 had its challenges, and my garden needed weeding. But for the first time in decades, I felt at peace. I wasn't waiting for a phone call that would demand my time, wasn't bracing for criticism, wasn't making myself smaller to avoid rocking the boat. I was just Amy, imperfect, healing, and finally free to live life on my own terms. Sometimes the worst accidents lead to the best outcomes. Sometimes you have to break before you can heal properly. And sometimes the family you choose is more important than the family you're born into. As the evening light stretched across my living room floor, I realized that at 55, I wasn't approaching the end of anything. I was just beginning.